The Year of the Fire Monkey. Under the new moon. It's such an honor to be here. And I want to thank everyone who was involved in bringing me here and for the incredible hospitality and welcome and support that I felt and experienced during my visit, and for your attendance here tonight. Tonight I want to talk about a constellation of things that have informed me as a poet, a talk that I'm dubbing, at least as a working title, Real to Real. In 1976, Robert Duncan delivered a talk here at the Jack Kerouac School of Naropa called Warp and Woof, where he said, "The idea of the poet is to make the plot as cunning as you can. Weave the weaving so you feel you know the warp and the woof throughout. You've got the whole thing plotted. You're weaving in and out. One thread goes under, the other thread goes above. Out of this business of weaving, whole areas of design generating themselves throughout the endless spinning of cloth. The warp and woof of double events through this whole structure." The notion of doubling is of intense interest to me because this idea of complications and crossings that make a poem's fabric, that make the complications of a story. And perhaps this idea of simultaneous doubling has something to do with my own complications and crossings, the woof of my birth in the Mekong Delta as a Vietnamese Eurasian girl during the American War in Vietnam, 1 year before another Lunar New Year, one that was later famously known for a military operation known as the Tet Offensive. Tet is the Vietnamese word for New Year. When my parents and I immigrated to the United States in 1969, I thought we brought with us a reel-to-reel music player. And for those of you in the audience that haven't had experience with this now vintage technology, I found this image. And I'm going to put it up here, just so you can see it. Maybe? It's not a big deal if you can't see it. Well, can you make it big though? Mm-hmm. Okay. What are you trying to do?
Display connection has gone to sleep.
Okay. Technology. I wish I had my reel-to-reel. There it is. Okay, so you can see it, right? The model was a lot like this one. And my parents were very impressed I could operate it at the age of 8. What's not pictured is the other reel, so that just has one side of the reel, but you need the uptake reel on the other side, the empty side, right? The receiving reel. And you thread the tape through so that it catches, sort of weaving, right, to the opposite reel. And the two reels that we had of music, right, because there were recordings, was a collection of Vietnamese folk songs, and the other was a compilation of the hits of Johnny Cash. And you can turn this off now. Thanks. I don't know which I would call the warp and which I would say was the woof, but these threads did feel somehow woven into my listening, my listening mind, my listening body, and became a kind of fabric. One singing the tonal monosyllabic language that is Vietnamese, a language that I lost, actually, through rupture and circumstance. I want to play for you an example of a Southern lamentation. And this one is instrumental only. That's the ancient monochord. And I think by contrast in the singer-songwriter Johnny Cash, who also had simple chords, right? But I understood the lyrics. And I apprehended his music as story half spoken, half sung, right? Which is a lot like poetry. Lower limit speech, upper limit song, as Zhukovsky once put it. I heard in the Johnny Cash's simple chord progressions registers of loss and grief, the despair of incarceration, Folsom Prison, the discrimination and systemic unfairness in the songs, stories, the legend of John Henry and Ira Hayes. And the Vietnamese folk songs that came to me as nerve ghosts, threading through my being, speaking to me but not speaking to me. Both sets of songs transmitted struggle. I think I was 10 when I first really heard, the song that was playing earlier, 96 Tears, by the band ? And the Mysterians. I had it on a 45-inch record, and I played it on a portable record player. You know, you pick the dust off the needle before picking up with the arm and setting it down again. In the song, I think it expressed some kind of inchoate need I had, something that went beyond my suburban youth of the time, where I lived in a state of mild alienation, in a state of not quite belonging to one culture and not quite belonging to another. There was something in the timbre of the sound that registered, the lyrics expressing a profound need, an acute desire for personal redress and ultimate reprisal, but it was more than a spite song. There was something that registered in the tremulous sound of the farfisa organ, that great trembling organ riff, and then later at the close, question marks, AKA Rudy Martinez's sharp cry and falsetto reachings. I realize now that what I heard was a voice that denies external definition, like the name of the singer, ? A voice that denies even gender as it reaches for an octave above. In this bare bones lyric, I felt all of this, but I didn't have the words to say what. I know now that it has something to do with it being his little song, 3 minutes, right? The perfect pop song, like a poem or a sonnet, Italian for little song. This was a little song of sadness and revenge, an expression of vocalized grief and quantifiable, almost ritualized remedy. Not one tear, Not simply many tears, but exactly 96 tears. Later, I came to discover that the band Question Mark and the Mysterians were part of a larger underground garage rock music, a garage band. As Mexican Americans that grew up in Bay City, Michigan, this band's family history was representative of a larger migration of people who had previously worked in Texas as migrant farmers and then moved for industrial opportunities and the promise of jobs in the automobile industry. 96 Tears was recorded on a tiny independent label analogous to small presses for poetry. The independent music label is called Pagogo, owned by Lillian Gonzalez and her husband, Joe Pato Gonzalez, who also operated El Pato grocery store in Saginaw, Michigan. In 1966, against hits from the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and the Beach Boys, Question Mark and the Mysterians' 96 Tears climbed to the Billboard's number 5 slot. That's revenge. Later, in the early 1970s, the band attracted the attention of rock critic Dave Marsh, who coined the term punk rock in a 1971 Cream magazine article about frontman Rudy Martinez, aka Question Mark. In 1979, when BBC Radio turned a couple hours over to David Bowie as DJ, the fourth song he played was 96 Tears by Question Mark and the Mysterians. Recently, in my preparation for teaching the collective works of Frank O'Hara, I came across a letter by composer Arnold Schoenberg. Because O'Hara was an admirer of Schoenberg, O'Hara was also known as a talented pianist who once trained and studied piano at the New England Conservatory. So I found this letter written in 1909 from Schoenberg to another friend composer, and this is what it said. My music must be short, lean, in 2 notes, not built but expressed. And the result is, I hope, without stylized and sterilized, drawn out sentiment. That is not how one feels. It is impossible to feel only one emotion. One has many feelings, thousands at a time. And these feelings add up no more than apples and pears add up. Each goes its own way. This multicolored, polymorphic, illogical nature of our feelings and their associations, a rush of blood, reactions in our senses, in our nerves. I must have that in my music. It should be an expression of feeling as if it really were the feeling, full of unconscious connections, not some perception of conscious logic. Now I have said it, and they may burn me. And so when I read this, I thought, yeah, that's what I want in my music too. But I'm not a musician, and I never have been. I'm a poet. But I want my little songs to have those many feelings, thousands at a time, to include the polymorphic, to write short songs that contain all of this illogic nature, a rush of blood and associations and unconscious connections. One of the significant features of South Vietnam is the Mekong Delta. The headwaters of the Mekong River begin in Tibet and travel south, discharging finally into the China Sea. In Vietnamese, the Mekong River is called Kieu Lang, the River of 9 Dragons. After the number of river mouths it forms as it empties into the China Sea. And if you try to count these branches as it reaches the sea today, you won't arrive at 9 because the dragons are moving. The delta means change. With siltation and rains and river flow, the Mekong continues to change and evolve. Islands propagate, oxbow lakes form, mouths silt up. The 9 dragons of the river are alive. I was born in the southern Mekong Delta, and sometimes I feel as though my mouth has been silted up, because earlier now when I pronounced the Vietnamese name of the Mekong, I had to attempt it by approximation by faking it in Vietnamese. I don't speak Vietnamese, yet I move and I'm alive, and I flow as I must, and especially in poetry. The god of poetry was known as Mercurius to the Romans, Hermes to the Greek, and Thoth to the Egyptians. The worship of the god of poetry was well established in Italy, Greece, and Egypt. The Greeks and Romans offered animal tongues to the god of poetry by throwing the tongues into a fire. In Egypt, he received the sacrifice of a stork. Sometimes his statues represent him without arms, because according to some, the power of speech can prevail over everything, even without the assistance of arms. In my tarot deck, he corresponds to the card, the Magician. The god of poetry was additionally the messenger of the gods. He was the patron of travelers and shepherds. He conducted the souls of the dead from this world to the next. He presided over orators, merchants, and declaimers. The god of poetry is also the god of thieves, pickpockets, and all dishonest persons. The god of poetry. When I was 12, in the poetry section of my local library, I came across a copy of an anthology called 1,000 Years of Vietnamese Poetry, a book of Vietnamese poetry in translation published in 1975 by Nguyen Ngoc Bic and W.S. Merwin. In the introduction, the opening sentence said something like, "The Vietnamese believe they have always been poets." This unlocked something in me, I think, and gave me permission to be a poet. And like any good pickpocket, I stole the book. I often get the question, why did you become a poet? And my joke, not joke answer is because I can't sing or play music. But part of the real answer is simply the Vietnamese language, and that the Vietnamese language is a ghost in me, a phantom language inside of me by virtue of the first 2 years of my life near Saigon, a language that was wired in my mind and onto my nerves, that speaks to me without a voice, one that I cannot voice. It's the language that was lost due to relocation. And this holds a parallel to the circumstance of my naming. At birth, my mother named me, as one does. She named me my full name, which is Meng Weng Wati Wen. And translated, it means something like beautiful flower from heaven. But I was named after my mother's daughter, who had the name first, and she died of some kind of infection of the lungs when she was 2. So it's to be doubled, a double haunting, a kind of doubling. As a teen, I grew up outside of Washington, D.C., in the suburbs near Bethesda, Maryland. It was the early 80s. And I was exposed to the punk and the post-punk sounds of the time, especially courtesy of WHFS, which is also known as their call, one of their call logos was homegrown radio. It was pre-corporate radio, programmed, if you want to call it that, by the DJs of the station. And the DJs were known for their incredibly deep and wide music knowledge, particularly of the underground indie scene. In the second half of the 80s, I served as a DJ on the college radio station, first at the Community College of Montgomery County, Maryland, and then later at WMUC of the University of Maryland. My show was called Mood for Moderns. And a playlist might look something like this. I did a little DJing earlier. You heard me. The specials, A Message to You, Rudy, Bad Brains, Sacred Love, Husker Du, 8 Miles High. And what strikes me as I look at this list is the act of yoking or doubling, a doubling of genres of influence. And what I mean by influence is how these musicians were informed. The commonality is punk that continued as post-punk, the music of my era, the music of the Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan years. Punk rejected perceived excesses in mainstream rock. Punk bands typically used short and often fast-paced songs with hard-edged melodies and singing styles and stripped-down instrumentation and often political anti-establishment lyrics. They embraced a DIY ethic, creating venues of production outside of recognized power structures, favoring local and community-forged channels. The Specials were a blend of reggae and punk, a band of Caribbean and Anglo-British musicians. Bad Brains, the Sacred Love cut that I played earlier from their album Eye Against Eye, that was released in 1986. Based in Washington, D.C., the Bad Brains remains one of the few all-black punk bands. Their sound is informed by jazz fusion, reggae, and punk. In Sacred Love, you can hear H.R., the lead singer, singing the lyrics through a telephone from county jail. This track has been called the ultimate makeout song. I've often wondered how the crossing of influence and the distancing of voice created a sound that prompted a critic to call it that. And how could one write the ultimate makeout poem? And I'm interested in writings that are like that have that kind of distortion and force. And I want my writing to feel that too, to be poignant like that. And when I say poignant, I mean as the etymological root of the word, poignant. Late 14th century, painful to physical or mental feeling of sauce, spice, wine, as well as things that affect the feelings. From Old French, poignant, sharp, pointed. Present participle of poindre, to prick, sting. From Latin, pungere, to prick, pierce, sting. Figuratively, to vex, grieve, trouble, afflict, related to pugnus, a fist, see pugnacious. And it appears that the word disguises a linguistic trick play, a double reverse. Latin pungere is from the same root as Latin pugnus, fist, and represents a metathesis, a transposition of N and G that later was reversed in French. Double reverse, pierce, point, vex, grief, fist. I think a lot about globalization. I think a lot about globalization. I have a friend who likes to call it global. This is a poem. It's called I Woke Up This Morning and It Was Friday. Scribbling aimlessly and abstractedly on scraps of paper, my life is completely uninteresting to you, dear reader. Oh, I guess I have a mother now. Pretend I am asleep. Hang up. She struggles to carry the flowers up the stairs. If only the world wasn't global. Don't be a sucker. This has a really long title. Smell, this is from all my friends that have to teach comp. Smell the purple incense that may or may not smell better than the rat you name composition. Winter fails. You drive a motorcycle around it. The difference in today is a Valentine's zit. You have your whole life ahead of you, except for the part that you already lived. Calmly, la la, your swirly clothesline habits. Why can't I have glitter toes? Magic lifts my hair. That's the wind. Ride a bike to Houston. Ride a bike to Houston. Ride and put your foot down on the pedal, unlike a flower. Ride my name out. Stop calling me Oriental Rick Wallace. Ride for the Saturnalia that I always sister clang and trafficking cars that will be the death of us. Look on the damned lake. Look on the damned lake. He was home. He was not home. Perhaps he was dead. My father's house on huge pile stilts as if the ground had shrunken up, swaying underside and subfloor where kitchen rug dust repels the family I was half conscious of. The water must be salty after performing an initiation drama, a short performance that disappoints the audience in the open kitchen where I sit in what is formerly called a breakfast nook. I am done and chapped with fault. Say to the entide as the house rocks, I will not put a rose patch on your lapel in the basement. This is after the 9 of Swords card in the tarot deck. Women with sharp noses. Women with sharp noses and underdeveloped third portions of their faces, skin wings spread wide, scary for their snake hair, and fingers loosely clutching daggers. My hands cover my ears. The rocky soil holds no visible life. I wear my favorite lace-up knee boots. It's the anxiety of a terrible future where we might have to move our debt to Vancouver or Morocco somewhere with universal health care, food straight from growers, no stickers on my apples, otherwise known as how can we live on one state employee pension. They float in a gray cloud, my mother in the dream, slurring and taking off her shoes. I can't feel the baby yet. How can you be in love with the baby? A lily mother. A lily mother gaping as a chasm. No, that's chaos, a swirl hole with a poke staff keeping track of the sky when talk is dirty and we do it. I am vine-like and small white flowers. I'm eating breast milk, goat cheese, leaves, and fruit hang down. Ronald McDonald. Ronald McDonald as a spokesperson makes my three faces scream, hair turn flame-like, a clown with large denominations, super white face. Trickle down on me. Hang a giant stars and stripes flag, make it a backdrop, throw question marks in the air, stars seen from the correctional facility. That means I have 6 eyes and nostrils. Prop. And his key had a bike tool. It was multi-tooled, which will be handy when camping or for the inevitable fleeing from marauding suburban desperation, crops in the front yard next to the driveway. We have a map of San Francisco which shows which street will be underwater. And shadowy shapes, visuals that indicate the former forms of ice cap glaciers, a prop to present to the president. Living in the dream under a US regime that legalized and actively encouraged random racism, I was the outspoken sister, defiant and scared in the parking garage at the racist agro frat boy. How to make dream jelly for birds when birds love them. We call named birds kingfisher, all trilly, a beefy kind of bird. Life eats life. Here's a fig. Wheeling black vultures collect now in the elm frosted black wings. My three-faced goddess nests in the roots, a fruit for childbirth. I wrote childbird originally, and think he will go far being male and white-looking and attractive. Gather leaves and dry them, sew them with reed string to make me a book, a story within a story. Tree roots mirror branches or veins like a placenta. Rowan's bitter berries sweeten after frost. A debt or credit bubble. House as weight or anchor. Pop it open like champagne. Party like that year. You can pour nostalgia, make a depreciation. Lovely or lonely, there is no time to slow down. Today's word, homeless. 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 Without a place to live. I'm going to read some newer poems. Now, I was just reading from Red Juice. I have copies of on the merch table. There's also copies of a broadside that is so beautiful, and I encourage you to look at it. And did I not bring up that poem, the poem from the broadside? I don't think I did. I'm sorry. And these, some of these, yeah, sure, that'd be awesome. And then I could show it off because it's so lovely. And it was made right here on campus in the Harry Smith print shop. And I think it's $10. Isn't that gorgeous? Speaking of singing, I'll just read this one now since I have it. Speaking of singing, this is for Orpheus. It's called Orpheus. My songs, sour and sweet, move rocks, persuade the dead not to keep me underground, instead to the new moon play, la 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 la, dee da, your black marble throne. Start, stop. This means try and try. This means losing. Way, head, my love, salt, sense, torn to pieces. You turn into rivers to tease and please the cry, cry trees. Speaking of trees, my other book, which I don't have any copies of, is called As Long as Trees Last, and it's named after my habit of trying to figure out names of trees, especially if I'm new to a bioregion. And I had lived in Austin, Texas for 14 years. 4 years ago, I moved to Toronto, where I live now. And so I went on a tree walk in our closest park. And this is a poem I made out of my notes. It's called Locust Tree Notes, East Toronto. Locust, black, also honey locust, less furrowed, inedible for humans, seeds eaten by squirrels, doves. They reestablish disturbed sites with nitrogen roots amend soil, my notes say soul. Roped, ridged bark more furrowed with age, fragrant flowers, white clusters hang down, legume family, giant flower tutus. Native to Lake Erie area, not native here, used to reclaim damaged land, susceptible to native bug borer. There's more trees in this one. The whiteboard. The whiteboard says, vag bleed. I read Anna Karenina. If your mother is a waitress, trees, I gave them names as a girl, the female ones assigned sad and willow, why? Another with a white beard. I hid the old dime there, silver sliver. Was her name Ida? With worn old feet, pennilessness, and blue blankets, polyester. All the time, goodbye to this extinguish in the wrongest of places. You eat the moon, suns, or chase the chase here. Bell, mortal. My green grief. I believed in open mouth. I disobedience informed by a spider ushered from an eye. Many pale green peppers in the garden and freak out and fall down in a weep. I said my heart was a coal miner cave-in. I was caved in, walking around. How to be moving like words and magic. A true blue song and damp deck and wet pussy. And the trees have leaves shaped like a heart-shaped leaves. We sent the spider to the window for luck. Who was Andrew Jackson? He was the 7th President of the United States. He was responsible for the Indian Removal Act. He was poor, but ended up rich. He was an enslaver of men, women, and children. He was given the name Indian Killer. He was put on the $20 bill. Digressive parentheses. Make heart-shaped cakes for the Queen of Heaven, things that make you cry. Geode stone pulse, that plant named wizard's herb. when the state of Michigan sells pristine treaty-protected land to make a limestone mine. I dreamt the spider crossed my eye and I crushed it into my eye. Why is the first day the hardest day? The city susurrus are us, especially if you get to keep the money. I didn't know. I didn't know my milk could return, racing to save the orphan baby this morning with ghosts, minor men, and shook the tricky omnivorous bandit before it could bite again. Truck exhaust enters the house, one hydrangea flower and leaves gust in the wind on my side of the fence, stolen. The smooth cup is upheld by a brown hand, as if to say, today is the 70th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. Haunted sonnet. Haunt, lonely, and find when you lose your shadow, secretive house centipede on the old window. You pronounce Aranese as air-n-ease, Electo, the angry, Megara, the drudging, Tisiphone, the avenger, voice of revenge. Women guardians of the natural order. Think of the morning dream with ghosts. Why draw the widow's card and wear the gorgeous Queen of Swords crown? Your job is to rescue the not dead woman before she enters the incinerating garbage chute, wrangle silver, raccoon power, forever a fought doll. She said, "What do you know about Vietnam?" Violet energy ingots, tenuous knowing moment. I'm going to read from the series that Banu referenced in that great introduction. I have some images. Let me cue them up. Okay. Can we get the projector? So I've been thinking about this series and this project, which is a biography in verse that features, among many things, history, personal history, social history, political history, but really important to me is to try to write about my mother's life, who, when she ran away from home when she was 15 and joined the circus. There's no way I can really say that without sounding dramatic. It's dramatic, right? So anyway, so then she became a stunt motorcyclist, and so this is her troupe. An all-woman motorcycle troupe. This was 1958 in Vietnam. My mother's the second from the left. So I'm just going to show you 3 more images, and then I'll shut the images off and I'll read poems. So she rode the barrel, and it's wood, right? And they would erect it in different provinces. It's kind of a pain they had to haul this thing around, right? Assemble it, and then there would be other attractions. And then merchants from the area would come in and sell their fruit and their flowers and wares. So they would set up for a while. It's like a fair, right? And you can see the canvas big top, and then the audience members are around. And they rode together sometimes. And you can see the line that the top right, or my mother's on the bottom, the top right, or my mother says, oh, that's the red line. You don't want to go above that. But then there's another line that you can follow, right? And you had to make sure you were parallel, you were going this way, because otherwise if you like point your bike at all, like that, you slide down, fall. And that's just her, just riding down a road. It's sort of a road. It's like barely a road, right? But it's moving, it's like it's a moving picture. All right. Those are all the pictures I have, sorry. Thanks. All right, so this first poem has a really long title. It sort of introduces the series. And I'm having to imagine a lot of this. I mean, my mother talks about it, but only reluctantly. She doesn't really want to talk about it. She's like, that was a long time ago. But now that she's older, she'll talk about it more. But it's also a function of coming from a place that, with very, difficult memories, right? And so growing up, she never wanted to talk about it, would never talk about it, never talk about Vietnam. So I'm having to imagine into it. And this title is sort of reference to that. My idea of the circus is my idea of the circus, otherwise known as My Mother Was a Celebrated Stunt Motorcyclist, Vietnam, 1958 to 1962. Very loud, a mad frenzy, the wooden barrel she rode would have roared. I first wrote rode. Left home to join the circus, 15 years old. You enter the bottom and wind upwards in spirals, the bike climbing the sides. You enter the barrel on a Peugeot with automatic tied-down handles. I mean, the kind you can peg so you can ride hands-free, arms out like wings on either side. Sometimes she fell tremendously, 50 feet, more. This is insane. No helmet or other gear like it. Ripped pedal pusher pants. Maybe the watchers above, all men in the picture, pulled their lips, sent and leapt or wanted to throw themselves to stop your flying hair, the howling and the howling, your smiling, riding, your falling and rising. So like I said, some of the poems are other poems. This one is a poem about the tones in the Vietnamese language. So there's 6 different tones, and depending how you say them, it means a completely different word, right? So I'm going to say the syllable, and the syllable in my example that is often given is the syllable ma. And so I'm going to say the syllable, and then I'm going to say the description of how you're supposed to be saying it, and then the definition. Ma, level, ghost. Ma, high rising, mother. Ma, low, falling, butt. Ma, low, constricted, rice seedling. Ma, dipping, rising, horse. Ma, low dipping, tomb. Napalm notes. Developed in secret at Harvard. Produced by Dow Chemical, an efficient, incendiary formula perfected on Valentine's Day, 1942. a thickened gasoline can be dropped from planes, napalm bombs. Also, flamethrowers. 8 million tons of bombs in Vietnam, burns at 1,500 to 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, 1/5 as hot as the surface of the sun. Very sticky, stable, also relatively cheap. The Vietnamese people. The Vietnamese people deeply love independence, Ho Chi Minh. The Vietnamese people love to bet, shaking the dice. The Vietnamese people eat pho for breakfast. The Vietnamese people are 82 million people. The Vietnamese boat people, no, I wasn't one of them. The Vietnamese people speak in second and third person. The Vietnamese people were devastated by aerial carpet bombing, is grammar corrected as aerial carpet bombing devastated the Vietnamese people. The Vietnamese people were born of a sea dragon and a mountain fairy. Notes on Operation Hades. Renamed Trail Dust, code name Operation Ranch Hand, call name Hades. 1961 to 1971, approximately 20 million gallons, or an average of 5,355 gallons per day for 3,735 days. Rainbow herbicides. Agent Pink, testing stages. Agent White, second most used. Agent Green, green stripe on barrel. Agent Orange, most widely. Agent Purple, similar to orange. Agent Blue, crop destruction. Applied aerially. Dense coastline sprayed from boats mixed with jet fuel, diesel. Monsanto Corporation, Dow Chemical. My mother's Vietnamese name is Diep, but when she was born, she was given a different name, and then it was changed, and this is the story of her naming. Diep before completion. Her first name, deemed too delicate for a failing baby. She was a baby failing, born blue, feet first. But newly named Diep after the strapping Chinese butcher, renamed She Recovers. She says later, it's an ugly sounding name and thus not popular. I say it wrongly, can't really say it, fake my way. Do we believe in the compassionate protector of children? The past tense of sing is not singed. This series is named 1,000 Times You Lose Your Treasure, and this is the title poem. And it references actually that Lunar New Year, the Tet that I spoke of earlier. 1,000 times you lose your treasure. She mistook the munitions for fireworks. She said goodbye to her lover. She threw the photographs in the pond. She dressed as an old woman. She shaved my head, my hair too light from the white father. She took off her jewelry. She took in neighbors, but not by choice. She could have been labeled a counter-revolutionary and dumped into a mass grave. She would have said that I wasn't her baby. Tet, 1968. Oh, there's another sonnet called Durian Sonnet. Durian's a tropical fruit native to that part of the world. It's a very fragrant delicacy. It actually barely makes an appearance in this sonnet. Durian Sonnet. I lost this sonnet once. I may lose it again. I wore the colorful dress described as concealment and surprise, the split sides and hugged features. You had to lift your arms out for the poster photograph. You had to leave your arms out to show your circus daring, to say you chose this, to say you were flying, fucking flying on the small French motorcycle, hair also flying, and the glamour shot smile. I asked Diep to tell me who they are, the women pictured in black and white colorful stripes, 5 in the all-women motorcycle troupe. Durian translates as private sorrow. She says, I think she's dead. I don't know what happened to her. She killed herself. I don't know what happened to her. Okay, we can't end there, so I'm going to read a couple. Well, there's 2 bummery ones, and then I'll end with a less bummery one. Dear love, not as a slave. The tomatoes look like 1-pound ox hearts, an impossible you with soft, strong arms. Gift. I lifted the skin and drank the camping white wine, swirled into circles. Am I the protected sheet in between the pines strung with blue, protectively? I think of you as pine crust, oak stairs, boy's feet, free crystal center. We find red for vivid fucking, red for birth blood, and my tongue color captured me at first. I know I'm not to be the center, sharply yellowish. Why ask that we sing, fill me up, buttercup baby, just to let me down? Autumn 2012 poem. Call capable, a lemony light and fragile, time like a ball and elastic so I can stop burning the pots, wondering, yes, electric stove. She is her, but I don't remember the ashes I obsessed. She said I was obsessed with not wanting to work with ashes. Mandible dream, says the street, and ash work, because the scorn and ions long there. I woke up in the overlooked dark. I work, do that warp, twistingly wrap the dead, black and white, like the long dead, starved pet rodent eating the basement curtains and peanut shells. I walks down sometimes. Why the abide? The advice was not fare better, but fail better. Auto dish soap, half and half, coffee beans, bake the golden things, rust colors. Here's the last one, last sonnet. Blousy guitar. Blousy guitar, I don't want to count the beats. Hey, my pen. I have bed hair in the best way, daughter of sunlight and air, and I'm glad you were born on this day, or put another way, that you were born. Let's be superstars. Let's call each other suckas. Turn everything into writing, Lord of my love, and eat new raw oysters with many condiments to lord and love and to be generally great. The flopping flowers that die in a poem. Summer solstice smacks me in the face, ridiculous, and I dream the different, like a naked sonnet, your raw, throaty laugh submerged under hot noodles. I wrote valley when I met longing, your laugh a river, a trout kind of green. Thank you, guys.